Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the Eastern Border. It's been a while since we've done a news episode, but, you have to catch up on some things right now. The biggest issue here being that very little can be found from news in Ukraine. The journalists are just not allowed at the front lines anymore, and we can't get much reports, and everything that I can get through my channels also is just unsupported, to say the least. It's just that hard to get reliable data. So what we have is sometimes a bit strange, but it's a lot of important stuff too happening here. So I'm gonna have to pick everything up together from what we know. First of all, Ukraine has exchanged its defense minister. Oleksiy Reznikov submitted his resignation after Volodymyr Zelensky announced his decision to replace Reznikov with Rustem Umerov, who used to be the chairman of Ukraine's State Property Fund. Now, unlike in Russia, where Shoigu, the Minister of Defense of that country, directly takes control of the military, in Ukraine it's a bit different. In Ukraine it's still like generals controlling everything. It's just the defense minister is a paper pusher thing. Zelensky said, quote, "I believe that the defense ministry needs new approaches and other formats of interaction with both the military and society at large. Now, Rustem Umerov should lead the ministry." Reznikov, who had headed the defense ministry since November 2021, shared a photo of his resignation letter in a tweet. Quote, "It was an honor to serve the Ukrainian people and work for the Ukrainian army for the last 22 months, the toughest period of Ukraine's modern history." And, Umerov, on the other hand, the new Minister of Defense, resigned from his post as State Property Fund chairman on Monday. Ukrainian politician and businessman of Crimean Tatar origin, 41-year-old Umerov, was a founder of Crimean Tatars Fellowship and an advisor to longtime Crimean Tatar leader Mustafa Dzhemiliev. Umerov served as a lawmaker in the Holos party from 2019 to 2022, and they became chairman of this state property fund. Following the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Umerov was part of the Ukrainian delegation that conducted several rounds of negotiations with Russia in Belarus and Turkey. He was involved in brokering prisoner exchanges as well as the Black Sea grain deal, which was later terminated by Russia. And we'll get to that grain deal as well, because Erdogan isn't there. Now, this replacement is the biggest shakeup in Ukraine's government since the start of, this whole invasion, as New York Times writes. The reshuffle comes after the defense ministry was hit by a lot of corruption scandals in recent months, and as the Ukrainian counteroffensive is entering a decisive phase. Now, this has been rumored a lot and everything, but weird to see this, but they're just checking out on their corruption. Reznikov, on the other hand, could as well be appointed as an ambassador to London so far. And this was, again, rumored all over the place, but again, just rumors. However, about the grain deal. Erdogan managed to go and talk to Putin for a bit. All the Russian press was already yelling about how Erdogan's come to bend the knee to Putin and all that whatnot. But they didn't really end up agreeing to anything. So that's the most interesting part. I wonder what they did agree with. Because, every such conversational issue is something that has either been agreed beforehand or just, it wouldn't exist. And to such a high level where Erdogan personally goes and visits Moscow, I don't really think that was just about the grain deal. Because think about it. Why would Erdogan himself personally go there? Sure, Erdogan profited from the grain deal, yes, but I don't think he would have gone there personally to do these things unless there was some sort of pressing, urgent need. And, might be mistaken here, but I think that we will see something else coming from the closed doors. Of course, Turkey and Russia has promised 1 million tons of grain, but yeah, that's kind of nothing. So that's a bit awkward. At the same time, Russian forces attacked the city of Kostyantynivka in Donetsk region, and they killed at least 16 people, including one child. Apparently, they struck the market in broad daylight. According to Hromadske, the regional administration said 31 people were injured. The attacks really happened in broad daylight and they struck the local market. That was the most tragical things in the past few news. I'm just trying to organize these things in matter of importance because some of you actually somehow do not listen to this show until the end. So sorry about that. But one thing that we can confirm is that, Robot Nia has actually been captured by Ukrainian forces, and now, the debate is it the first Surovikin line, is it the second Surovikin line? You can't really tell. The Russian appointed head of the occupying administration of the Zaporozhye region, Yevgeny Balitsky, said in a television interview that the retreat of Russian troops from the village of Robotny was a tactical move. Quote, the Russian army tactically withdrew from the settlement because holding on to a bare surface when there's no possibility to completely dig in doesn't really seem like a viable option. That's why the Russian army withdrew to the hills, RBK cites Balitsky as saying. He also stated that Robotny is a population settlement that only exists on a map. According to Balitsky, the Russian troops have taken up the dominant heights near Robotny with the Ukrainian forces positioned below, which apparently suits the Russian army. Now, of course, you have to remember that, previously their statements about what suits their army and what doesn't has also been very twisted, especially when it comes to Kherson and tactical withdrawals from all over the place. So, who knows? Meanwhile, we also have a purported leaked mobilization order, which calls for 200,000 new Russian conscripts. Government officials denounced it as fake, but, if they denounce something as super fake, it might as well be very, very real. This was spotted on Telegram and was apparently signed by Sergei Shoigu. The Ukrainian news agency Union has published a photo on its Telegram channel with the headline, Reindeer herder Shoigu ordered to mobilize 200,000 more stags by November the 1st for the war against Ukraine. According to the Russian news channel Sota, a number of Ukrainian outlets have reposted this order. Meanwhile, the Russian authorities insist that the order is just fake news. The regional government of Buryatia called the document a fabrication. Chelyabinsk military commissar Andrei Maksurov says that no such order exists. And defense ministry spokesman Andrei Kartapolov also claims the order is fake and has nothing to do with reality. In a comment for TASS, Kartapolov added that Russia has no need for additional mobilization since the military is effectively meeting its needs by actively recruiting contract soldiers, that is. And that's the thing about the contract soldiers. They claim that they have signed new contracts with a lot of people, a lot of them. And they point it out as massive success. However, I have reasons not to believe this information. For two reasons, which are both reported by, at this point, my new best enemy, Maxim Kalashnikov, and all his contacts from, whatever mess happened with the Club of Angry Patriots, which is now split over, thinking about what was the reason of Girkin announcing his presidential bid. First of all, it is widely known that Russia is experiencing insane amounts of difficulties, especially with manpower. They have pushed everything to the front to defend against Ukrainian counterattack. Not really a counterattack; it's just an attack. But they lack everything in the back of their systems. You see, they don't have enough troops to guard units, guard military warehouses, and do a lot of things that they ought to be doing. And everyone keeps telling me from all sorts of sources that mobilization in Russia is inevitable, and I tend to agree with this. Now, these so-called new contract soldiers, for the most part, that's the problem. About 80% of them were already fighting in the front lines. It's just that they're no longer just mobilized, they have switched to contract services, or ex-Wagner Group soldiers who also were there switched to contract services. It's just that technically Russia has these new contracted troops. However, in reality, the number is very low and does not even, fix all the gaps that they have in their front lines. The thing is that they just changed it to put it all under one umbrella and to just focus on getting them all under single management. Of course, a lot of trouble continue with the logistics and everything in Russian army. But after the murder of Prigozhin and after Girkin has been arrested, a lot of these war corps that used to be so-called war correspondents, that is, who used to be very aggressive and criticize the Russian army for all their mishaps, even though they were pro-war, they're mostly shutting up right now because a lot of them have been gotten into trouble and, haven't been beaten over the head for their stupidity. Meanwhile, by the way, Russian opposition continues to argue about what they're going to do with the new beautiful Russia. They're into debates. Maxim Katz, one of the guys that I listen to, also approached them. But there is real problems. And I have to answer some questions here about this, about the fact that how they need more soldiers and why everything is going like it is going. Because I think there's a little tiny issue that the Western people kind of don't really understand. You see, remember that everyone kept telling you that Russia's going to win in 3 days, right? At the early war. The fact that Russia has all these problems and that right now they are just being happy for the fact that Ukraine is not taking major cities in a single day, that's the reason why. I mean, they do have insane numerical superiority. They have a lot more things. All these things that existed on paper to some extent still exist, except that there's this massive amount of corruption, massive amount of issues in the Russian army, which is why Ukraine hasn't fallen. The situation that we have now is what you would get with the whole thing where you have a massive amount of troops and tanks and everything, and the army is massively incompetent. And again, this goes against all the source books of assaults, right? It's a miracle that everything's happening because in some directions, currently, Ukraine is actually scoring less casualties than the Russians are. And they're attacking. This is not normal. In every military guidebook ever, you'll be told that the attacker needs a 3-1 advantage and that the attacker always takes more casualties than the defender. And that would make perfect sense. But right now, the Russian army is just so demoralized and things are so bad with them that they take equal and in some regions even greater casualties than Ukrainians do. The problem here is that Russians still have a lot more of, stuff, especially when it comes to air. But they are already experiencing these damages in vehicles and manpower and everything because they've thrown everything to the front lines. And the thing is, if this continues, then the Russian army is going to at one point collapse because, there's this sort of spherical line, if you look at some military charts about how easily can you lose combat readiness and combat ability. And Russia is close to that in many, many cases, except that they had a lot of time to prepare these defenses, which are still working. And just because they're not running away, just because they're seeing Ukrainians, because of multiple different threats, it does not mean that Ukrainian counterattack is failing. It just means that they are actually succeeding because they're moving forward in a lot of these positions. You shouldn't really underestimate things. If the Western countries would have given Ukraine what they needed at the time when they needed it the most, then the situation would be vastly different, of course. But it didn't happen, so we have the situation that we have. But meanwhile, back to the news. Putin and his eternal wisdom managed to put out an insane speech once again. He said in an interview with Russian propagandist Pavel Zarubin on Tuesday that, quote, Western managers put an ethnic Jew in charge of Ukraine in order to cover up the anti-human nature of modern Ukraine. Quote, this makes for an extremely disgusting situation in which an ethnic Jew is covering up the glorification of Nazism and those who led the Holocaust in Ukraine, which brought the destruction of millions of people, said the Russian president. And ordinary citizens of Israel understand this better than anyone. Take a look at what they're saying on the internet, end quote. Ukrainian Foreign Ministry representative Oleg Nikolenko later commented on Putin's statement, writing on Facebook, quote, Putin's chronic fixation on the Ukrainian president's ethnic background is just another manifestation of the anti-Semitism that is deeply rooted among the Russian elites. We call on the world to strongly condemn the Russian president's anti-Semitic comments. In the modern world, there should not be any place for hatred on ethnic grounds. But Putin just following the brave Soviet tradition, because Soviet Union was, extremely anti-Semitic, and you can find that out if you just listen to some of my older episodes. And this somewhat concludes the most important part of the episode. However, I still have some interesting news for you. You remember that MA-8 helicopter in August, which basically defected to Ukraine, and they had a lot of issues? Yeah, that guy has given some interviews out there. And most interesting part is the fact that the pilot gave an open interview. He was introduced in the movie as Maxim Kuzminov from the Russian Air Force's 319th Regiment, the helicopter regiment. He said that he, first of all, chose to defect because he opposes Russia's invasion of Ukraine, did not want to take part of it, which makes sense. But then two other moments happened. He, of course, spoke how Ukraine actually doesn't have any Nazis, but we all know that at this point. What we didn't know is that apparently everyone, because of very stupid decisions by the generals out there, is forced to watch Putin's speeches all the time, and there, a lot of political work is being put on. And this, by the way, was a statement that was publicized by Murs, one of these other guys. It was kind of similar to this, because currently Russia is employing a lot of political commissars in their units. And they don't even know what to do because they are literally forcing the soldiers up in the front to kind of glue posters with Putin's news and propaganda on the trees, even though, they're being artillery shelled. But the most outrageous thing that this pilot said was that in case of whatever, they had to move one of their officers' cats to the front line. Just a regular, some special cat with a, one of those specific breeds or whatever. And they took up 2 helicopters with full crews on them to transport the cat from Rostov-na-Donu nearby the Russian border. At this point, everyone knows where Rostov is, to the special military operations zone, right? And one of them was Mi-8, one of them was Mi-15, and just in case, to protect the very important cat. I mean, resources wasted is, of course, a bit of an understatement here, but that's what happens. That's what happens when your corruption is total. But again, do not think that this just means that the Russian troops are gonna totally blow up instantly. It just means that we are in the position where we are because of this situation. And finally, I wanted to touch upon something that happened to me. I think it was a week ago, maybe a bit more. Look, I work so hard, sometimes the days fall over. Well, what happened was that I managed to get into a nice little chat with some of my very legitimate businessman friends. And, I'll have to put this very carefully. Very, very, very carefully, okay? So I managed to chat with them, and they said in a request that I was not exactly able to counter. And, it's one of those things that you can't just say no to some people in some cases, right? And then they invited me to take a look over some weapons deal, which they were supposed to be guarding, but they found this suspicious, and they thought, it was very useful for me to be there. And it ended up with some people getting arrested next day. That's about it. Apparently, that was one of the things, and they're involved with other things. But apparently, Wagner Group had tried to recruit here in Latvia, among other weapons deal things that was going on. It was a bit of a mess. But this is the reason why in my Discord everyone got worried and why we did a little reconstructure over there. But you get into some legitimate businessmen and they say, "Oh, Kristaps, we're going to guard this thing and we don't want to get into trouble, but you're not one of us. You can just go and, maybe report after this and do some things." And, let's just say I did. I did what I could, and really happy things turned out as they did. And let me tell you, I'm really, really glad that our state security service and other services work diligently, very effectively, so to speak. All of this is, of course, super allegedly, and I can't really get into many more details, but kind of had to be done. And I just this is about as much as I can give you right now. Also, Victor, our friend, has published a video on his YouTube channel. It's either that or search for Victor Nordland, and you'll find it. It's going to be great on YouTube. He's published the video about how the bombed Odessa cathedral looks like. That's very important for you to see, I think. It's just 6 minutes long. It's a really nice journalism video, and I think he really deserves the views. If everyone on my Discord already has looked at this, and Discord links are all over the place. If you can't find the link to our Discord, by the way, you can just email us, and I'll, of course, answer you. So it's a lot of mess happening. The worst part is that I really can't get any massive confirmations from the Ukrainian side because, again, they're becoming more and more mum, and you can't focus and give you. I can't really focus and give you stuff that I really don't know, that I can't really confirm because I've made some mistakes in the past, and this is really not the time to be kind of, not careful about the information that I give you. But to end up this episode, I basically just got some interesting news from Russian Agriculture Minister Dmitry Patrushev at a meeting of the Committees on Control and Agrarian Issues of the State Duma, reported by TASS. Quote, the problem with the fuel supply to agricultural enterprises has sharply aggravated in the last week, and by now we can talk about a looming disaster, stopping the harvesting campaign and sowing of winter crops. According to the head of Ministry of Agriculture, not so long ago it was about problems with fuel prices and about somehow selling diesel fuel to agrarians cheaper, but now the issue is that it should be at least at some price. The department has to manually work with oil refineries in each region and find fuel for the companies. Quote, the problem with fuel is a screaming one. It must be dealt with by everyone, the minister emphasized. He proposed to completely stop the export of oil products until the situation stabilizes, although he noted that this is not an initiative, but his thoughts aloud. In turn, First Deputy Energy Minister Pavel Sorokin said that the work with the Ministry of Agriculture is carried out on a daily basis in terms of bringing the necessary volumes to agricultural consumers, Interfax notes. The official added that the Ministry of Agriculture has stated the need for 500,000 tons of fuel to complete field work, and this issue is being worked out with oil companies. So, even Russia who's now selling off its oil to India and everywhere else, they don't even have enough to give to their own people who work their fields. And about India, it's paying in the rupees, and rupee is not even a convertible currency, which means that you can't take it out of the country and you can't bring it in the country. You kind of have to ask for permission, so no one really wants it. So Russia's profits on paper from sales of India might not be as great as people tend to imagine, which is always a fun thing to notice. But that's about it for today. I'll be back with more news, more interviews, more interesting things happening on the show. I expect some pictures and everything as soon as I fix up my drone once again. And please, if you enjoyed the show, consider becoming our patron on patreon.com/theeasternborder, or just click the donate button on theeasternborder.lv. That really helps the show because, again, I have to pay on that day. I have my bills to pay. I have a lot of things to do, and trying to make ends meet and making this show for you guys as best as I can. And extremely huge thanks for everyone who already is our patron. It's very important to us, and I wouldn't be here without you. So once again, extremely thankful for all that you do and everything. And I'm going to check the Discord links, but they're in the previous episodes as well. I think I've posted them all over the place. So again, if you can't find it, please just email us and message us, and we'll deal with the situation. And as always, до свидания, товарищи. And remember, happiness is mandatory.